Outrider podcast, Bad Business, is a 6-part series about crime and detective fiction. I'm joined by a pair of shady figures, my friends Todd Robbins and Paul Fecto. So come with us as we descend into the seedy underbelly of fiction, where charming crooks, hard-boiled detectives, and femme fatales are all up to some very bad business. Welcome to the Outrider podcast with Todd Robbins and Paul Fecto, and today we're going to be discussing The Woman Chaser by Charles Willeford and Die a Little by Megan Abbott. And as seems to be our trend, we'll have Todd with some bio information and we'll jump right in.
Okay, so Charles Willeford, born 1919. He was apparently an orphan as a kid, and he lived with his grandmother. And apparently, when he was a teenager, he thought she couldn't support him anymore. He runs away, and he kind of lives like a hobo, from what I could tell, until World War II. He joins the army. He's a tank commander, serves at the Battle of the Bulge. And then, when he gets out of the war, he comes back and teaches himself how to write fiction. He wrote 2 memoirs, too, I believe.
Yep.
Which are pretty well thought of.
And didn't he publish his first book of poetry in 1947?
Possibly. Yes. I didn't...
Okay.
I'll be honest, I didn't know he published a book of poetry.
Oh, yeah. So, yeah, he had some skills.
Did indeed, yes. His motto, if he could have a writing motto, tell the truth, they'll accuse you of writing black humor.
That's true.
So, I don't know if we're going to lead in with this speaker, Richard Hudson. Are we assuming that people have read these novels when we
No.
do this?
Basically, I would not assume that they have. Maybe they have, maybe they hadn't. We'll just jump right in, and if they want to, pick up, they can.
Well, so we have our car salesman.
Right.
And he's pretty good at that.
So he says.
Right. Yeah, he does. He's confident.
Yeah.
He gets into our...
We don't know how reliable he is. And he's got a weird relationship with his mother.
Doesn't he?
Yes.
I don't know. I haven't...
And what are we to make of his relationship with his mother, sort of, if not incestuous, borderline incestuous?
It's definitely borderline. I have no idea what my mother's boobs look like.
The little... He goes on and on about how good looking she is.
How hot she is. How perky she is. It's not right. To me, that seems to be the one of the primary crimes in this novel is his rather bizarre relationship with his mother.
Well, and then how does it translate to his relationships with women, just in general? Which are not good.
Right.
Well, it's interesting to use the word crime. Why do you... I mean, it seems that we're being provided there some sort of indication that his background is certainly different from what a mainstream American idea would be. And yeah, I think we're supposed to ask the question, how could this seemingly over-familiar relationship with his mother translate to his being really abusive of women?
Yeah.
I don't have an answer for that. It seems... I mean, what's the pop psychology answer for someone who's got a quasi-romantic relationship with their mother.
We don't get a very good answer from the narrative, I don't
No.
think.
No, not at all. He's
He's not enough of a navel gazer for us to get there, as far as I can tell.
right.
Interesting point.
Well, and my thing is, I never was quite sure how rational he was, because he seems a touch delusional, and so I was kind of curious. What are his major crimes, really? He's abusive to a couple of women. He embezzles some money, and he sets something on fire.
Yeah. Revenge at the end.
And we had talked before about how in even the crime versions and the noir stuff, there's a certain similar detective element. There's some mystery, and we see that in Abbott later. There's something that someone is trying to figure out, but he's not really doing any of that. He's not tracking down a mystery of any kind. He's
in pursuit of a goal.
right. And it's kind of this weird psychotic.
He's trying for something.
Right, but how good was his movie, do you think?
According to him, it's if the executives had just got the hell out of the way, he'd have been. What is Willeford saying about that? Because the author, he goes on about a movie is 90 minutes long, period.
I took the Richard at sort of face value there. I don't know if you're talking a cinematic masterpiece, but his criticisms of the film industry seem to be very valid, and my desire to see his 60-minute version, or no, it's a little over 60 minutes, so it won't even play on TV. My desire to see that is, I'd give it a chance, and his criticism seems to make sense.
His criticism
of the movie industry. I mean, it's, on one hand, he is this sort of ridiculous narrator, and particularly his crime at the end of going and burning the print seems pretty ridiculous. And so you want to think he's not a reliable narrator, and so this movie he made is probably ridiculous too. However, his desire to be an artist there seems almost on the money to me. I mean, he wants to make the movie he wants to make. He thinks it's great. He thinks it's going to deliver insight to the average person out there who he criticizes, maybe with a little more vehemence, but really not that different from what Chandler had said in the The Long Goodbye, the last book we talked about. Right. He just wants to get that message out there, and that seems like a very noble motive for such a screwed up guy.
But what is his message? I mean, it seems rather nihilistic. The guy runs the truck driver in his movie runs over a kid and then dies. What I guess I did never pick up on what exactly the message that he claimed that this movie was supposed to do didn't quite jive with his description to me.
I thought he was saying that it's the reality of the American dream rather than what the ballyhooed American dream is. This guy, what's it really like for people who work all the time? This guy that has to drive a truck, the best part of his day is getting in the truck. Because at home he doesn't have anything there.
Right.
And so I think that's what Hudson's message is that we're screwed.
Yeah, I agree. He's this sort of horrible example of capitalism run amok in the way he views manipulating people in order to make money. Right. And yet he has this ability also to step back and criticize society, and see, almost from a quasi-Marxist point of view, how pathetic this competition element is.
He's a character of a narrator. I mean,
right.
he's such a mishmash of conflicting drives, and I was trying to figure out why we stay with this guy. Is it because we're just so fascinated by his anti-hero approach?
Yeah,
You know,
there's a certain mania to him, and it's like, what the? You're
yeah,
It's that. It's like watching a drunk playing in the middle of a street. You're just like going, when's someone gonna run him over?
right. But
Yeah,
he's got
mania is a good word.
he's got a little bit of an artistic ability, kind of a, but not from any kind of academic training. So he's not been schooled enough, or he's not intellectual enough to be cautious as someone would be if they've been in a few, liberal arts classes over the years. I don't necessarily want to say cautious, but I guess trained is what I'm thinking there.
Right.
So he just comes out with whatever's on his mind.
Yeah, I just found it interesting at the end that I don't want to say I was rooting for the guy, but that I found his artistic approach interesting and somehow valid, whereas halfway through the book I had sort of dismissed him as a kind of Jim Thompson Killer Inside Me, which is another book we almost, I think, read but didn't, where it's just the guy's just a sociopath, and this guy's he's kind of a sociopath.
Right.
But
He is, yeah. No doubt.
I don't. Yeah.
I had come across something comparing Willeford and Thompson, or mentioning them in conjunction, and I didn't see exactly what it was. Although I think there was probably a little less.
Between Thompson's first-person narrators and Willeford's?
Yeah,
You mean?
Willeford, I think, was cast as a little bit more. This might not be right, but optimistic.
Well, the killer inside me, the guy's a serial killer. I mean, saying that Richard Hudson is more optimistic than
Than a serial killer.
that narrator's, yeah, that's not saying a whole lot, but yes, definitely.
Yeah, Richard just can't check himself on certain things.
Right.
And it seems that, well, he just obviously behaves, he can't handle it when he doesn't get what he wants on the film.
Right.
And so he reacts to that. And his treatment of women, I don't know what you make. That's really, to me, where the sociopath comes through the most. It's just,
They're there for gratification.
yeah, he's got no conscience at all there. I don't get it.
It's even more than just someone who is going to be sexually liberated. He sort of deliberately ruins the career of his assistant in a way that I'm not really sure why you would take that step other than to be cruel.
Oh, the woman. Yeah.
Yes,
Sending her
you
back
know,
to
he-
the typing pool. And right.
Yeah, what was her name? I'm suddenly
Yeah, he
blanking on-
badmouths her. Yeah, after he
Bangs her.
Yeah, he says he puts out a lie about her that she's not good at her job.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, that's where he really. I mean, he has this rationale for when he what he does with Becky, with his sister-in-law. Sister-in-law?
Yeah.
Am I saying that right? Yeah, something like that. Stepsister, maybe.
Stepsister-in-law.
Yeah. He has a rationale for what he's doing there. It's going to actually help her in the long run, but I just can't see any rationale for. I mean, I guess maybe he doesn't want her around anymore, and he just does what he needs to get rid of her.
Yeah, but is rape necessary?
No, but at least in his own mind,
Right.
he has some sort of rationale, and he doesn't attempt to give us, that I recall, anything about, the call to her supervisor. Mm-hmm. And then obviously after that, the thing with her being pregnant is along the same lines, where he's just absolutely cruel. I don't know any other way to say it.
Yeah, that's really the fascination for me with this character, that we even read past a couple of things that he does there.
Mm-hmm. Yes, that's what I was trying to say. That I couldn't believe I got to the end. I'm like, this guy is interesting, and with parts I thought we were getting a totally, portrait of a psychopath kind of novel, and it is, but it's somewhat more nuanced than that.
So why do you think he makes the attempt at the beginning to do it in third person, as if he's... And then there's
Great
that
question.
nifty switch where, about just the third section, he's like, I can't do it anymore. This is me. And
I suppose it has to do with that idea of genre restriction again, that he knows some books and the books are supposed to be written this way, but just like the movie he wants to make, it's just not going to work for him to write standard third person, limited omniscient point of view. Him being Richard Hudson, not Willeford.
right.
Well, and he even comments when he's talking about, he wants to create something, but he knows he can't try to write a book because that takes years of apprenticeship. He can't become a painter. That's going to take too long. So we know that he's kind of experimenting as a writer anyway, or we're supposed to be aware of that. He's not a trained writer.
Right.
It's too bad he wasn't around, and today he could have had a YouTube channel or something like that and been fine.
He could have been self-publishing on Amazon.
Heck yeah.
He wouldn't have had to mess with the studio.
Hey, wait a minute. What's wrong with self-publishing on Amazon? I'm sorry, go ahead.
One thing that I really enjoy about this book is the sort of the wisdom that you get from unexpected places, like when Bill, his sales manager at the auto lot, the retired military guy,
Right.
comes in to counsel him. He comes in to find out what the hell Richard's doing at the studio in the first place, but then he ends up talking to him about writing.
Yeah.
And let me just read this one paragraph where Bill's telling Richard about the writing process. But it ends up, what's the secret, Bill? This is Richard asking Bill. Rewriting. First, one word at a time. After you get enough pages done, you have something to read. If you can read it, you can revise it. If you revise it enough times, you come up with something pretty good. All writing is like that. It couldn't be any other way. So if your story is, go ahead, put it down as best you can. You can always revise the lousy draft, and you aren't going to get a perfect script the first time. So, that's actually not that bad of writing it.
Really?
Those are the rules I live by. Just put it down and then fix it. But don't try and...
From the guy. This guy's got bigger problems than Richard's script. He's got the Santa suits. What about that?
Yeah.
That seemed like an unnecessary cruelty that was designed to sabotage his intentions. If he hadn't put the guys in the Santa suits, then taking that money wouldn't have been a big deal. He could have buried it in a salesman actually doing his job. Instead, he puts them in the Santa suits, which almost guarantees they're either going to quit, not make money, or half-ass it, which means he's not covering himself.
The Santa suits are just...
Well, I like the fact that he gets arrested while wearing it. Right?
I love the Santa suits. And being so insistent about it.
Well, what's next?
Nothing else to say about Chuck?
I guess the interesting thing I saw, and I don't remember where I saw this online to give somebody credit for it, but somebody out there in some post or something compared him to Philip K. Dick, said he was like sort of to the crime genre what Philip K. Dick is to science fiction.
How so?
And that's the thing that resonates there for me is this book is a really interesting novel. It fits in the noir tradition in the sense of that sort of subgenre of first-person narrators who are evil. But beyond that, it's a really tricky, complicated novel. And I think that's kind of where Dick didn't get as much accolades and attention in his day, but he is come to be viewed as a more sophisticated writer than Bradbury and Heinlein and some of those guys, and that Willeford is kind of in the same boat, that he's got sort of got novels out there that are going to go beyond straight genre and be even prescient in dealing with sociological issues.
He manages to put some kind of metaphysical meaning behind the form. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and that his metaphysics seems resonant to a modern reader. I mean, a 2018 reader, as I think this book does. I mean, do we even want to use the term toxic masculinity? I mean, everybody should be reading this book now in a way. I mean, it's perfect for a lot of the discussion that's going on now.
You just wonder
but yeah,
if
also
a publisher
just the fact
would
that he's a novelist and he's doing, he's not bounded by the genre.
Would a publisher even try to come out with something entitled The Woman Chaser now? Maybe.
Well, maybe. If we're going to do a new woman chaser, let's chase Megan Abbott. Segway!
Wow, that was slick.
That was awful.
Right, so Die a Little, which is, I believe it's her first novel. She's published quite a few books, so I'm not quite sure why we ended up picking her first book. I just think we kind of picked it, really.
Yeah.
I think we like the picture on the cover.
Well, but we had several good pulpy looking books to pick from.
Yeah, I know, that was odd. I don't remember why, but yeah, I see it as the first on the list too.
Megan Abbott was born in 1971, so she's still working, obviously. Hard-boiled crime fiction from a female point of view is one way to look at it. She's got a PhD in English and American Lit. She's won an Edgar for one of her other novels entitled Queen Pin, which that's a pretty damn good title. And she writes, according to the bio that I read, whether or not she still does it, and I haven't gone and looked, but she writes a blog with Sarah Gran, who's another. Sarah Gran is the author of, among other things, this detective series, Claire DeWitt. So, a couple of good writers there.
Can I actually say that, I mean, Abbott, she seems to be playing the publishing game. She's got an academic background, but she's also very much a brand, and I imagine does pretty well. If you look at her social media and stuff, it's all very, very steeped in noir and sort of looks like, roundabout marketing for her books.
Right. I didn't even get around to checking that stuff, really, but to be honest.
Well, she probably, she is with Simon & Schuster, so, she's got quite a budget behind her, probably.
Well, at least when she published these, whether or not she still is with stuff coming out now. I think she just published one just this year. She probably is.
I'm just saying the podcast doesn't discriminate against financially successful writers. We'll put the millionaires in there too.
I don't know. Is she a millionaire yet?
I don't know how much her books sell. No idea.
But this one pretty clearly falls into one of our categories.
Doesn't it, though?
Because she is...
The personal.
Yeah.
One of Paul's, when we talked about that first episode.
Right.
Yeah, and even more so than just the narrator, the structure of the book is that James M. Cain school of hard-boiled crime, where you have an average person who you wouldn't normally put in a, Chandler-esque world, who gets pulled into that world and brings that perspective to it. And so that is a whole subgenre of hard-boiled stuff too.
Nice.
Yeah. Would you say that this narrator has also a bit of the existential thing because of the way the book ends, it caps with?
I was thinking yes.
Yeah.
I mean, what are we led to contemplate there? That her Alice, her antagonist, I suppose, is suggesting that perhaps Laura kind of liked that world herself.
Yeah. That
Yes.
she had that darkness in her that Alice had.
Yeah. Laura wants to explore the underworld just a little bit too.
And she does.
And she does, yeah. So, if we're going to talk about the characters in this thing, and I thought a lot of the characters were pretty spot on, such as Alice, her brother's wife. I mean,
Right.
really, the character to me just kind of drives the action. I thought Alice was pretty vivid. Lois, for example, is a kind of a bit player character, pretty
Right.
vivid for me. Joe Avalon, the kind of the boss or the guy that's kind of running the action.
The pimp and the drug pusher.
Yeah, the pimp and the drug pusher. He was vivid. The PR guy,
Mike Standish.
Mike Standish. I liked him. I mean, just as a vivid character for me. What about her brother, though? I mean, to me, that was the calculation that was the hardest for the author to pull off, because she's got this. Laura, our speaker, has this cop brother. We're supposed to believe that he's experienced enough as a cop. He's been through some things. So, I mean, he's obviously seen some things, a lot more than probably the average civilian has, just
Right.
as a cop. Yet he doesn't seem to be able to pick up on it that his wife's on speed.
Yeah.
I mean, when you read those scenes with Alice without being told, she's either doing cocaine or speed.
Right. But I guess the question is that did Laura pick up? When did Laura pick up that she was on speed? That Alice was on speed. When did Laura do it? Because that's who's
She gets
controlling.
told, doesn't she, by one of the detectives?
But not until late in the book.
Or maybe it's Mike
Yeah.
that tells her. Might be
Right.
Mike that tells her.
Right. But not until late in the book.
Right.
And since she's the one controlling the flow of information, if her brother withholds it from her, he may have known. It's just because at some point he knew some of her background as well, and he embraced it, and he was glossing it over, ignoring it.
Okay, so
But
go ahead, Paul.
sorry, I think Todd's point still stands in that he is an amazingly Boy Scoutish kind of character. And why that was interesting to me is, again, if you think of the sort of noir template, women in a traditional hard-boiled story, the really good, moral woman that you're supposed to like, I suppose, can't really be part of the story except as maybe a victim, because she wouldn't be involved in this horrible dark world. So in traditional hard-boiled stories, the femme fatale, who is essentially an evil woman because she is involved in this man's world of sex and pleasure and leisure. The good women in these hard-boiled novels are really kind of these cardboard characters that stand in the background. And what's interesting about this novel is that you have Bill, I think, in that role. There's obviously very interesting characterization as far as the brother-sister relationship. But beyond that, I think
Right.
what I think Todd and I are kind of picking up on the same thing, is that he's this cop, this all-American guy, but he basically is external to Laura's descent into the dark world through most of the novel, until Alice actually pulls him in late in the novel. But until that, he's oblivious, and he's just kind of a cardboard character in a way because of that reason. Does that make sense?
I think Jason's point is, I'm kind of struggling with it now, because if I understand what Jason's saying, and you can correct me, you're thinking maybe that Laura's presentation of her brother is just off, and that maybe he did know Alice was on speed, and Laura, since she was kind of having to learn as she went,
Right.
she just missed it. Is that where you're going? What you're thinking?
Well, if she sees her brother as a Boy Scout figure and she doesn't want to see the darker side of him, then since she is the narrator, the one in control of the flow of information to us, the audience, then she's going to drop, and it's that whole unreliable narrator problem you're going to have. She's going to drop and ignore information that does not flatter her or her brother, whom she wants to
Idolize.
to flatter, to idolize. And it isn't until she discovers him milking, or not milking, but bribing the Flophouse woman.
Right. Yeah.
The matron.
That she realizes her brother does have this dark side, and she has to confront that. And so, yeah, I mean,
But I still think that Abbott is playing that card. You know, obviously, she sort of self-consciously, I believe, tried to take on a feminist or at least female perspective
right.
to this noir.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
I think part of that is taking that character of the good woman, which is sort of a character that shows up in a lot of hard-boiled novels, and placing that in the character of the brother. This time it's a guy, and he's a good man, and he does good stuff. And because of that, he's not really part of the plot in the early part of the book, first half, 3/4. Even I think both things could be true. I mean, there could be something about an unreliable narrator and what Laura reveals to us at the same time that we still have this interesting gender reversal in the typical genre format.
Right. Yeah.
It is a nice dynamic to think about. It's complicated, which is something that is good in novels.
Right.
So we have this unconventional investigator, don't we? She's a school teacher. What about her, the narrative tick? Or is it a tick, or is it a technique? And I'm just going to read a couple of little places where the author does this bit. And it's this repetition of phrases within sentences, or, okay, she starts a section. That night I think about the picture of Alice and Lois. For a long time, I think about telling Bill. I think about asking Alice or Mike. But I know I will do none of these things. I know I will hold on to it tightly. So this hold on to it twice.
Right.
Okay, and over here to another place. It happens throughout the book, but I picked this one other spot. This is probably we're about halfway through. I'm ready to tell Bill. To tell him at least what I have seen, if not the lengths I have gone to see it.
It gets...
Is it rhetoric? What were you gonna... Go ahead.
It sounded, when you mentioned it in the email, it sounded like at some point it bothered you a little bit or threw you out.
I was just trying to figure out why it was in there. Why that recurring sort of... Was it a tick or a technique? Is it something that she's doing to build a sound, for example?
I kind of chalked it up to her just, this is that character's voice. Every person has a vocal tick or a habit or a rhythm to their speech. Mark Twain does it in Huck Finn. He maintains that speech pattern for that character, which is unique. Nobody else has it. When dialogue is reported, it's different than that rhythm. And I think that's kind of just what she was doing here. And I also, towards the end of the book, because it gets more frequent when they go through that last moment where they're setting Alice up, in order to save her brother. It becomes more pronounced. It happens more frequently. She drops the back ends of sentences even, and I think it's a psychological resetting. You kind of have to ask yourself, who is she telling this story to? and then that might explain that vocal tick.
What'd you get from it, Paul?
I think that it's probably if you think about her as a first-person narrator who is entering this mysterious world that she's not normally a part of, it's supposed to sort of mirror the idea that we live in normal, bourgeois society, and we don't see that dark world flowing along right next to us. So when she'll do something like, he could keep this as a secret that with the repetition is you get it one time, but the second time is her delving a little more deeply into what's going on. So I think rhetorically it's supposed to be sound at least get the reader into the idea of delving into a mystery. Here's a word, you saw the word, wait a minute. Now think some more about that word, and there's even more there than you first thought.
We definitely have a feel in this book of the speaker wants us to know that we're heading towards something darker, and it's going to get revealed as we go along, and we get a lot of little hints about it. So I do think it's a good possibility.
Okay.
I mean, but it's part of the voice though too. I mean, I do think it's part of the voice. It's a combination of things, and you just wonder when the writer was putting the draft together and just in the part of composition, if it just kind of came out like that, was it a decision? You just kind of wonder. We'll never know, obviously, but
right. Go ahead, Paul.
Okay, good. I was just gonna say that'd be an interesting question to ask her. I mean, there are so many dumb things you could ask a writer about their book, and that's one that's actually would be really cool to hear her respond to that.
Well, it's definitely more of a vocal pattern than a writing pattern, because when I was reading that, I associate that more with with verbal storytelling, getting out there and something that you would say to another person, not having written it down. That type of repetition is more of a conversational vocal tick than it is a literary tick. That's why, it can still be freighted with all of the weight that you wanted to put in there, Paul, but I think it's makes me want to know who's this character's audience? Who is she telling this story to? Is she confessing this to somebody? Because it is first person, and it does carry a weird tense with it. It's not entirely present tense. It does, although it's mostly written that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's almost a feel that the speaker is trying to understand it herself, and the writing of it is a way for her to finally sort of fathom what went down.
Yep. Yeah, it's almost like a transcribed oratory. So who is she? Is she telling this to a shrink? Is she telling it to another detective? To the detective that? Yeah, because it's an interesting style, and I enjoyed it, and it was a very damn quick read. I was surprised because I thought I wasn't going to get through it because it took me a while to get through Willeford, which was surprising. As fast as that went, but of course I get distracted by other things in life.
We all, yeah, definitely.
I was definitely impressed. I liked this book a lot, more than I liked the Willeford.
I liked it too. Yeah. So what are we supposed to think about Alice, though? Is she a criminal? I mean, is that where we are with that character, or is she just a person who had a hard life at a young age and got drawn into this underworld activity?
Well,
does she try to escape it when she takes up with the brother, or is she being manipulative and just kind of building a little defense mechanism for herself somehow?
I don't know. There's a part of me that thinks that in some way, yes, she was trying to escape her past life. That's why she had thrown Lois basically into this dark pit as opposed to herself. There's a bit of a masochist to her as well as a sadist. She's not pleasant, but she's trying to be. But she doesn't have the right toolkit. And so in order to be her the perfect housewife, she's still got to be on speed, and to keep that other darkness away, she has to insert Lois into that to exercise that sadism. But yeah, she's trying. She is trying. And then what I also think is that she might have achieved some kind of balance if Laura hadn't been so damn nosy. If Laura hadn't started getting suspicious and sneaking around and wondering if Alice hadn't tried to hook her up with Standish, it might have just continued in this weird state with, lovely 50s house parties, and no one would have noticed. But inserting Standish, taking that kind of...
Right.
she was... So I think what Alice was doing was that she wanted to be good, but she didn't have the right tools or emotional skill set to actually be good. And so she was using that sadomasochistic, a drug addict, stamina for abuse in order to be good. And of course, all that does is create suspicion and blow up.
Right. The hidden world keeps emerging.
Yep.
Keeps coming forth, where she wants to hide it, but...
Well, I certainly think that Alice is supposed to be a interesting take on the femme fatale. She does occupy, I guess, an evil role in the book. I mean, she obviously sort of sets Lois up, but there's also sort of an understanding of her lifestyle to go along with the narrator's, almost secretly being drawn to it, that I think is supposed to sort of explode that whole femme fatale stereotypical character. I think Alice is supposed to sort of come alive.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the descriptions of her, her eyes were... I should have quoted.
The first time with they're rotten or decaying. Yeah, that was weird.
It was weird, and it's alongside her. She's very beautiful and seductive too. So
unsettling. It was very unsettling.
You can't quite tell what the brother is seeing. Is he missing? I know I'm back to the brother now.
Right.
But,
no.
But Laura picks up on it, and somehow the brother doesn't see it. But you know what? It's possible. It is possible.
Well, I think like that passage about the eyes. That just seems like, textbook femme fatale stuff. I mean, she has a beautiful image to the world, but she's really corrupt at the core by this evil, dark world. And that's certainly how Laura interacts with her. But I think by the end, Laura and Alice are closer together, in our minds than they were at the start.
True.
I agree with that.
Well, and why can't I remember the brother's name?
Bill.
Well, I think what's kind of unspoken in the book, I mean, or maybe it's partially spoken or it's partially hinted at, is, whether Bill knew what Alice was or not, he knows she came from a less than idyllic background. And so he is doing this classical masculine thing where he's saving her. He's coming to her rescue. So whatever she may have revealed to him, whatever he did come to see before, we have that moment where we realize he's trying to put the fix in to protect her. Whatever he saw, he was going to try to fix in his own way. But of course, his efforts are completely irrelevant to 90% of the story until his efforts come into conflict with his sister's desires. And his sister's desire is to protect him and keep him from disappearing into South America.
Well, and he comes into conflict with his own value system. I assume if we take at face value her portrayal of him as a Boy Scout, that he's there wheeling and dealing at the end and offering police protection to a narcotics racket just to get his wife off the hook. So he's compromised his own values there.
But would he say that he had compromised his own values? I mean, he made a commitment to this woman, through marriage, and she didn't directly murder anybody.
I don't understand why this, what is the guy's name, Shore, who's really the bad guy.
Right.
The Harvey Weinstein character.
Well, and worse than that, really. I mean,
yeah, hopefully.
But
hopefully worse than that.
Why does that guy have to be? Does the novel reveal enough to tell us why that guy has to be?
That's a great point. That seems like a lost thread, because he thought at one point, wow, we're going to go after this, Hollywood mogul who abuses women, and then at the end it's kind of like, oh well.
He just goes on abusing women.
No,
we assume.
You can even have him killed, right?
Right. But Alice got killed.
Yeah, Alice winds up in the ditch too.
Yep.
So I suppose Lois then is the connective thread that, I mean, let's say if Alice in fact does want to try to make a break from her old life to the new life, but you can't do that.
Yeah.
No one can do that, really. I mean, the past will reveal itself.
Mm-hmm.
So Lois is sort of the unreconciled past coming back on Alice.
The sacrificial lamb, almost the Christ figure. She's damaged and broken, but there was nothing in her personality that deserved any of that. She's an addict. That's it.
Yeah, I mean, we don't really know. I don't think, if I recall right, what her motives were for sending the postcard to Laura, but certainly one possibility is those were noble motives, that she was trying to, pull Alice back where quote unquote Alice belongs.
No, the postcard came before she rescued her from the easy rest.
Yeah, it did.
So maybe I'm trying to remember if there was a particular kindness that Laura directed at Lois.
Oh yeah.
Was there?
I bet we could pinpoint a specific. I just say in general it seems like that, and I think that's why Lois would call her when she was in that situation, or would allow her to help her when she was in that situation later on in the hotel.
I mean, I would say that Lois recognizes probably that Laura's just from another realm, really.
Right.
So she's
maybe even recognizes that Alice is throwing her, to the wolves, and is hoping in some way to get revenge that she can't get for herself.
Could be. But it's funny that all of the characters seem pretty aware of this dividing line between the good bourgeoisie working folks and the nasty underworld folks, and yet everybody's crossing that line all the time. I mean, we have the other cop's wife, her name escapes me at the moment, but she winds up using drugs and overdosing.
Oh yeah, that's a sad story.
Even Bill, like I said, the fact that he winds up playing that game by saying coming in and dealing with the woman at the safe house or whatever it is.
Right.
That line's pretty damn fluid in this novel, even though all the characters seem to talk about how, they know you're on one side of the line and I'm on the other side of the line, but it doesn't really stop people from moving back and forth.
So then is Mike Standish really the only somewhat decent guy?
He's got a few liabilities perhaps too, but
doesn't he kind of do Shore's bidding? He's one of the people who do Shore's bidding, correct?
Yeah. Yeah, he's trying to protect Shore at the end there. When he looks in the file, he suddenly realizes, oh my God, this is going to put someone onto Shore's tail, and he backs off. And that may be self-preservation on his part, but, you know, nobody comes out of this thing smelling like roses.
No, not at all.
That's what noir is supposed to do, right?
Well, that's part of where I was going, I think, with just talking about these characters, because they're complicated characters.
Right. Full of moral ambiguity, which is the stuff of decent literature.
Absolutely.
What do you think about the brother-sister relationship at the end? It's almost like they're a married couple again at the end, like they're a married couple at the beginning.
All the way through the book, what about it? I was thinking that all the way through.
We needed to set up Bill with Richard Hudson's mom somehow. Get these two families separated. It's definitely, there's overtones of that. I'm not just dreaming that, am I? I mean,
they're closer than a lot of brothers and sisters, maybe.
Yeah.
Is it just because it's just the two of them?
Well, yeah, they are orphans, so there might be, at least for all of, the intimacy that Laura talks about in this, at least she's like never has some loving description of his penis.
Right.
Quite like Richard Hudson is like, my mother's breasts are magnificent, and we get to see them, and it's just a little disturbing.
Yeah, it's interesting that both of our books would have that little odd subtext and neither one sort of puts it to bed at the end, so to speak. I mean, neither narrator actually steps out and addresses, boy, my relationship with my family member is unusual.
Right. I mean, I have a sister. We're not quite as intimate as Bill and Laura, but, I could see families that were, had a certain amount of closeness that, if you're not used to it, if you're not familiar with it, it might seem awkwardly, too tight.
Well, I could also imagine a family where the mother being topless wouldn't be a big deal either. If they're at least sort of hippie family, that's very cool. But it's the way that the description is in the book.
True.
And also the way that, I guess the big thing is the domestic situation, the way they seem to be set up as, partners in life at the beginning, and this horrible woman intercedes, and the horrible woman is dispatched, and they wind up at the end back in domestic tranquility.
That is sort of what happens. Laura she is suspicious of Alice from the very beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And you do kind of get the impression that she wouldn't mind finding something wrong with Alice. And of course, there are a lot of things wrong with Alice.
Right. Yeah. Now, if she just wanted to find something wrong with Alice and there wasn't really anything wrong with Alice, then this would be a literary novel about,
Sure. If it was just that Alice felt like eating a half bag of potato chips, or maybe went to the dog track and during the afternoon and secretly spent part of her piggy bank twice a week,
Right. It'd be a literary novel about jealousy and family drama. It's as opposed we've got drug addicts and masochistic
stuff.
film producers and sadistic film producers, prostitutes, lesbianism. Did that seem too convenient, too serendipitous, too circumstantial, the whole discovery of the playing card deck with Alice and Lois?
Did she find that under Alice's bed?
No, in Standish's
It's
drawer.
that's right, it's at Standish's.
Right. And I'm not quite clear, did I miss something? How did Joe Avalon's address book get into the bedroom? I mean, we get some speculation on it, but we don't really get a clear... Are we supposed to not know?
That is a valid question. I'm not sure I am clear on how that ended up there.
Yeah.
It just indicates that he's somehow involved still with Alice directly. Either maybe they actually were, sexually involved, and that's why it's in the bedroom, or maybe it's just the fact that Alice is part of his business. That is sort of a business book, is what it's for, I believe.
Right. Yeah, that is one of the things about first-person narrative, about that type of focalization, is that you can have these things that just miraculously appear because that person who's controlling the flow of information, which you're getting that focalization through, isn't going to be able to fill the reader in on mysterious stuff, and you just kind of have to accept it, that suddenly this address book with this code in it appears under her foot, and whatever her speculation is, you're kind of stuck with that and that mystery. So yeah, I was just curious if anybody else had any other ideas besides.
Well, I felt like that a lot through the narrative, but I felt like it was a suspend your disbelief kind of thing with the typical crime novel where there's a lot of coincidences and reversals and MacGuffin type things that happen, and so I just kind of went with it.
I went with it too, but you do sort of wonder about those little plot things that happen.
Right.
Is there an explanation for it? It's not. It didn't bother me.
Right.
So it probably worked pretty well. I mean, honestly, the only thing that I even questioned, and I've already mentioned it, was just the brothers, the portrayal of the brother.
Mm-hmm.
Where is he with Alice?
Right.
And I think we've talked it through pretty well, really.
Yeah.
But you kind of get an interesting dynamic there in the beginning, because in most hard-boiled crime stories, the women characters can be kind of secondary, and in this book, the women seem to be doing all of the action, and a lot of the men are pretty clueless. I mean, depending on whether you believe Bill was or wasn't, it seems like all those detectives and stuff they're doing their thing and playing their softball game. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, one woman's on drugs and another woman is running around playing detective. And
why is Shore? I mean, if we're back though to the women characters and their perspective, why does Shore get to do what he gets to do? Is it because he's powerful and rich?
Yeah. That's about it, I think.
I'd say.
Well, I definitely think it's a testament to the strength of the book and the writing here, is that when we sit down and we do talk about the gaps and the questions, it doesn't diminish from the book. This, as a first novel, this is damn solid.
It is. Yeah.
I can see why she's got the career that she does. I mean, it's a solid little book.
It moves.
Yep.
It really does move.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind knowing some more context about, because there are like the first 3 books all sort of have this same feel, that they look like they're sort of classic noir. Mm-hmm. It seems to me she's really self-consciously writing within the genre, where if you think the Willeford was being unbounded and just sort of going where he wanted to with the novel, she's really sort of, I think, consciously trying to do things within those boundaries.
Well, she's definitely very familiar with the genre and with the tropes. Her actual first book was in 2002, and it was, what was it? Oh, The Street Was Mine, White Masculinity and Hard-Boiled Fiction and Film Noir.
Okay, so it's an essay, book of essays.
It was, I think it was just an entire work. It might have come from her doctoral thesis and something like that. So,
might have to track that down.
Yeah. Sounds pretty good. So anything else?
We're on to James Elroy and Elmore Leonard.
Yep.
Oh, God help us.
An American urban sound.
Yep.
Is one of the things we'll be talking about, because both of those writers really have a voice, I suppose. And so
it'll be
Richard Hudson's going to seem like a minor league player compared to the people we meet in Elroy.
So it's going to be American Tabloid and Unknown Man 86?
Unknown Man number 89.
89.
I agree. There's a couple characters in that Elroy American Tabloid that would... they'd take Hudson and dump him in the ditch.
If they scare Todd, they scare anyone.
All right. Well, then we'll be back in a few weeks. The Outrider podcast is hosted by me, Jason Quinmalott, and produced by Heather Ann Eden. You can subscribe to the show on iTunes or Stitcher and go there to please rate us and give us a review, or you can get the show straight from our host, podbean.com. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.